Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is another edition of Pinch Hit Friday. Today, we're going to be talking about shoulder structure and how it drives function. And it's somewhat of a timely podcast because we are doing our spring sale on my Sturdy Shoulder Solutions product. This is one of my most popular resources. Good for folks in kind of the rehabilitation realm, but also those who are dealing with healthy athletes and general population clients who are just looking to learn a little bit more about how I evaluate and program in the upper extremity. So hopefully there's some pearls of wisdom for everybody. If you go to sturdyshoulders.com and enter coupon code SPRING25, you'll get $40 off on the product. Again, that's sturdyshoulders.com and it's SPRING25. This runs through this Sunday at midnight. Now, with respect to the topic we're going to talk about today, I think the best way to talk about this is with first just a little bit of an anatomical basis. And what I'm trying to really put out there is there's a really good system of checks and balances working at the shoulder girdle to make sure that we basically balance the big movements and then more of the smaller joint movements. So when we talk about big movements, we're talking about osteokinematics, right? That's flexion, extension, internal and external rotation, abduction, adduction. And then we talk about the subtle joint movements, the arthrokinematics. That's really your rolling, your rocking, your gliding in the joint. And what we realize is when we look at anatomical diagrams at the shoulder, we can appreciate this really important concept. Just think about what your lat, your pec, and your deltoid have in terms of attachment points on the humerus. These are really big prime movers that are responsible for the majority of the actions that take place at the humerus, the upper arm. And you'll see that all three of them attach on the shaft of the humerus. So if you go further down on the arm, they have points of attachment that they're further away from the actual joint. Conversely, if you look at the rotator cuff, all of those muscles, actually the tendons attach on the humeral head. So if you think about that, it's really like a seesaw analogy, right? If I take a kid and I put him at the end of a seesaw, he's going to feel much heavier. He's going to be in a position to exert more force on how movement takes place. Conversely, if I bring him a little bit closer to the midline of that seesaw, it's going to not be nearly as pronounced an influence on the movement that takes place. So what we're realizing right now is that there's an interplay between these big muscles, the deltoids, the pecs, the lats. They have to be counteracted by the rotator cuffs. So you have these large prime movers that have to be offset by the smaller stabilizers. And perhaps nowhere is this more important than during the acceleration phase of throwing. So if you look at the research, pros have about 200% higher lat recruitment during acceleration than amateurs. And think about the lat. The lat attaches down on the thoracolumbar fascia. And some people it actually will attach on the ilium, all the way down at the low back / hip. It comes up, it has some costal attachments on the rib cage. In about 40% of the population, it attaches on the scapula, and it actually wraps around to the front of the humerus on the humeral shaft. So it's a big muscle with a huge cross-sectional area. It's got a really long tendon. This is a muscle you want to do big jobs, right? And throwing a baseball, the internal rotation that takes place during acceleration is the fastest motion in all of sports. So your lat is working crazy hard to accelerate that baseball from the position of layback. Now, here's the tricky thing about it. Because that lat attaches a little bit further down on the humerus, what's basically taking place is the ball is gliding forward in the socket. So as you internally rotate your shoulder, imagine the ball sliding towards the anterior aspect of the joint. So what needs to happen is your rotator cuff has to fire on all cylinders to make sure that humeral head stays nice and centered on the socket. We also know that the humeral head is like a golf ball sitting on a golf tee with respect to the glenoid, right? It's a very small surface area for a big humeral head. So we have this interplay between the rotator cuff, as well as the biceps tendon as an anterior stabilizer, just trying to keep that thing centered. It works in conjunction with the glenohumeral ligaments. But when you're moving fast and you got really strong muscles doing big jobs, you're always kind of working, with very little margin for error. And additionally, when we talk about ball release, the long head of the biceps tendon works with the rotator cuff as a compressive stabilizer at ball release. So it's about a 1.5 times body weight in distraction forces on the humeral head when you get to ball release while throwing a baseball. And so your rotator cuff, your biceps tendon have to really work hard to do this. And what we have to appreciate is you've got to have adequate scapular upward rotation. You've got to have good extensibility through your lat to let that to take place. And if your cuff's weak, either your biceps tendon gets overused or the lat and the teres major have to really lengthen further at ball release. So I know I'm getting really deep into the weeds on this, But big picture, you have some giant muscles that are doing big jobs in your pec, your lat, and your deltoids. These are the muscles that can get really dense and fibrotic and nasty. They can lose range of motion. So they need to be strong, but at the same time, they need to have adequate length. But just as importantly, they need to be offset by those smaller stabilizer muscles. And that's why preseason rotator cuff strength is such a good predictor time and time again of whether an athlete will sustain a shoulder injury or an elbow injury for that matter. Is if you show up weak, bad things happen, and usually the weakness is assessed on these smaller muscles that play really, really important roles in stabilizing the joint. So you've got to have extensibility, length through those big muscles. You've got to have the right amount of good stiffness through those smaller muscles. And then obviously you've got to have the right movement patterns to make it all work together. So we're giving folks a good long arc of deceleration. So hopefully this all makes sense. I'd encourage you to listen to this podcast again and just pull up an anatomical diagram of the latissimus dorsi on Google Images, and then just pull up another one of the rotator cuff attachment points right alongside it, and you'll appreciate, how much osteokinematic influence the lat has versus the arthrokinematic influence that the rotator cuff has. This is very, very important for keeping all shoulders healthy, but particularly in dealing with baseball and any other overhead throwing athlete, because they are working with such a small window for error. Like I said, we're running a big sale this week into weekend. It's sturdyshoulders.com. Spring25 is the coupon code. Check it out. You won't be disappointed. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great weekend. This episode is brought to you by First Form, an awesome supplement company with a comprehensive product offering that I enjoy using myself and with our athletes. Beyond the broad product line they offer, I also love First Form's commitment to ensuring that their products are the highest quality. They meet NSF certified for sports standards for both consistency and purity. Their Formula One protein powder is the best tasting option I've had in over 20 years in the fitness industry, and they've got several great flavors to choose from. I also lean on their creatine monohydrate to support hard training, their collagen for joint health, their magnesium to help with sleep quality, and their fish oil for a variety of health benefits. Our daughters and I also share a love for their high-protein meat sticks, which have become a big hit in the Cressey household for school lunches and on-the-go protein options as we head to gymnastics and softball practices. Of course, First Form products also have been really popular with our athletes at Cressey Sports Performance, and they're used by some of the top-performing athletes and most recognizable sports franchises in the world. Above all, the people at First Form are top-notch, and that's a rarity in an often unethical business. First Form is dedicated to empowering people on their fitness journeys, and that dedication is matched by only their unwavering commitment to exceptional quality and unparalleled customer service. Check them out for yourself at www.firstform.com/Cressey. That's 1stphorm.com/CRESSEY and get free shipping on your order of $75 or more. Additionally, they're offering amazing 10% more than your money back guarantee if you're not fully satisfied with your purchase. Again, that's firstform.com/Cressey to get free shipping on your order of $75 or more.